Viewer discretion is advised.
Las Vegas Raiders, Derek Carr. Carr has always been an easy target for jokes, considering he's never won anything, and he just played in his first playoff game last year. Whenever he is on the verge of looking like an elite quarterback, he shits his pants. He's basically Kirk Cousins with eyeliner. He can beat bad teams, but just don't expect him to show up against contenders. Verdict? Properly. Las Vegas Raiders. The Raiders have missed the playoffs in 17 of the last 19 seasons and haven't won a playoff game since 2002. The 2022 AFC West might be the best quarterback division ever, so even if Derek Carr finally breaks through to another level throwing to Davante Adams, it won't be enough to win anything important. You Raiders fans know better than anybody that Carr is a tease and that Gruden and Mayock's horrendous drafting has set the team back years, especially defensively. You've come to accept this, but I know what you haven't accepted: the Tuck rule. That's right. All these years later, the singular play that launched a dynasty in New England and potentially prevented a Super Bowl title in Oakland still stings harder than anything. The fact that the asshole who benefited from the call is still playing is just a daily reminder for you Raiders fans that life isn't fair. Oh yeah, John Madden was a playoff underachiever, and Al Davis was a human scrotum and an absolutely miserable person to be around by all accounts. Las Vegas Raiders, Jimmy Garoppolo. Good lord, he's still so handsome. Oh my god. Anyway, this is a football video. Get control of yourself, Barry. Okay, I think I'm ready. All Jimmy has done as a starting quarterback in the NFL is put up really good stats and win a lot of games. Unfortunately, he can't stay healthy, and he had his chance to win a Super Bowl a couple years back and didn't come through in the fourth quarter. I regrettably think that's the closest he will ever come to winning a championship as a starter. And I think everybody basically knows that he's a middle tier quarterback, but not much more. Therefore, I would say his prove it rating is a 6.9 out of 10. Las Vegas Raiders, Davante Adams. Adams is quietly putting together a Hall of Fame career. And I say quietly because for all the attention he gets, you never really hear people talk about him in the Hall of Fame. Well, he's not that far away from 100 career touchdown catches, and every single member of the 100 touchdown catch club is a surefire Hall of Famer. And Adams should get there this season. For my money, he is the best receiver in the NFL right now. Fortunately, he is toiling away on shit Raiders team. Honorable mention goes to Max Crosby, who is now like one of 3 good defensive players the Raiders have had over the last 25 years. Las Vegas Raiders, 2019, Clelin Ferrell. The former 4th overall pick was considered a reach at the time, and he has just 10 sacks through 4 years to show for it. Miss. 2019, Josh Jacobs. Jacobs is developed into one of the better running backs in the league. Hit. 2020, Henry Ruggs III. I think we all know why he's a miss. 2020, Damon Arnett. Arnett is already out of the league, which is all you need to know. Miss. 2021, Alex Leatherwood. Leatherwood is one of the worst offensive linemen in the league and not even on the Raiders anymore. Miss. Las Vegas Raiders, Marcus Peters. Peters is a big name because he used to be arguably the best ball hawk in the NFL. 3 times leading the league in interception return yards and twice leading in pick sixes. But he missed all of 2021, and he hasn't made a Pro Bowl since 2019. Last year with Baltimore, he allowed a terrible passer rating average against, and his grades over the last 2 healthy seasons of his career have been pretty average. Basically, he's just another in a long line of washed up players to end up with the Raiders. Big name, little impact. Not my Jimmy Garoppolo, though. Las Vegas Raiders, 1976, Ken Stabler. Famous premarital sex haver Ken Stabler could also play on the field. In 1976, he had 27 touchdowns with a 103.4 passer rating, and he went 11-1 in his 12 starts. The Raiders finished 13-1 and finally broke through over Pittsburgh to make it to the Super Bowl for the first time in the 70s. Stabler continued his great success in the postseason, narrowly defeating the Patriots on some controversial late calls, before his efficient outings versus Pittsburgh and Minnesota in the last 2 games to capture the Raiders' first ever Super Bowl championship. Looking back now, I'm surprised that he wasn't selected Super Bowl MVP. Las Vegas Raiders, Josh McDaniels. Ever since the Raiders hired McDaniels to be their head coach, he's been on pretty thin ice, based off of his disastrous tenure as Denver's head coach, and the fact that some people consider him to be a Tom Brady merchant during his time in New England. Also, backing out of the Indy job in 2018 didn't win him many fans either. Neither did the Raiders, going 6-11 in his first year last year after making the playoffs the year before. McDaniels now has Jimmy Garoppolo at quarterback, so handsome instead of Derek Carr. But you just get the sense that if it's another bad season, the Raiders will move on. Therefore, I have McDaniel's hot seat ranking at a 4.5 out of 5. Las Vegas Raiders. Congrats, Raiders fans. You finally replaced career loser Derek Carr with the gorgeous specimen Jimmy G. That's the biggest win your team has had since 1983, when Ronald Reagan was still in his first term of peddling crack into poor neighborhoods. Despite your status as an iconic franchise, you've been completely irrelevant over the last 40 years, besides the tuck rule game and getting your backs blown out in Super Bowl 37. Tom Brady owned all of you for the last 20 years as a player, and now he owns you in retirement. Literally. You got 3 rings from 76 to 83, but you should be sitting on 6 or 7 rings. We all love John Madden, but the fact is he was a terrible big game coach, going 2-6 all-time in championship games. From 1967 to 1977, the Raiders made the AFC Championship game 9 times and had just 1 ring to show for it. It would have been 10 times too, if not for the Immaculate Reception in 1972. Remember that? But that's the past. What about the future? Oh, you got Mahomes in your division. You're not winning shit for at least 15 more years, and you all know it. All you Raiders fans who wear jerseys to games and paint your face silver and black are pathetic losers. Bro.
During the Raiders' Week 4 loss to the LA Chargers, a group of Raiders fans made their way to Mark Davis's box at SoFi Stadium. They began chanting, "Fire McDaniels." Davis responded, "Oh, the irony. I have warned you about Josh McDaniels, twice actually. Now, a season and a half into his coaching tenure with Las Vegas, he's repeating the same mistakes that made him a failure in Denver. This man has learned nothing. Let's look at this train wreck." Let's back up and review Josh McDaniels' first go-round as a head coach, when he was fired after less than 2 seasons in Denver. After McDaniels proved himself as an offensive mind in New England in 2007 and 2008, McDaniels became a hot commodity on the coaching carousel, and the Denver Broncos handpicked him to succeed Mike Shanahan, the greatest coach in their franchise's history. McDaniels inherited a cast of stud playmakers on an offense led by Jay Cutler, a 26-year-old quarterback coming off of a Pro Bowl season. He took that offense, which compiled the second most yards in the league in 2008, and systematically gutted it to its core over the next 2 years.
What the fuck are you doing? At some point will you learn the fucking plays in the National Football League? Jesus fucking Christ.
It started with Cutler. McDaniels publicly shopped his incumbent quarterback in a hypothetical deal involving Matt Castle. And when that deal fell through, Cutler wanted out. McDaniels, who was the de facto GM in Denver, shipped Cutler to the Bears for Kyle Orton and a slew of picks. Picks that he squandered. It wasn't just the quarterback. McDaniels alienated Brandon Marshall, who caught 101 passes in 2009, and was promptly shown the door in the offseason. Tight end Tony Scheffler was neutered and jettisoned. Eddie Royal, a promising rookie wide receiver who put up nearly 1,000 yards as a rookie, saw his targets drop from 91 to just 37 in just 1 year. McDaniels tore down the Shanahan Broncos and reconstructed them in the Patriots' image. But like a clone that keeps degenerating with every copy, it only got worse. And now, 13 years later, he's done it again with the Las Vegas Raiders. It gets forgotten too easily, but the Raiders were a playoff team in 2021. They battled through a deadly tragedy at the hands of Henry Ruggs, and a mid-season scandal that got John Gruden fired, to finish 10-7, falling in a close playoff game on the road to the eventual AFC champion Bengals. This was not a broken team, far from it. It was Mark Davis' decision to replace beloved interim Rich Bisaccia with Josh McDaniels. But it was McDaniels that took a playoff team and wore it to the ground. You could make the case that the Raiders were a fluke playoff team in 2021. And you might be right. They were outscored by 65 points that season, but 66 of those came at the hands of the Kansas City Chiefs, a team they were not so uniquely unequipped to handle. Bisaccia had the Raiders winning 4 straight close games at the end of the season, and despite difficult circumstances, they were a team with chemistry. 10-7 became 6-11 1 year into McDaniels' regime. Let's try to understand why. Hunter Renfrow eclipsed the 1,000-yard mark in 2021. While he was targeted 7.5 times per game that year, He was targeted just 5 times a game in 2022 under McDaniels, echoing what he did to Eddie Royal all those years ago. You can make the case that that was the Davante Adams effect, but you can also wonder if that was for the betterment of the overall team. Las Vegas' passing game put up over 4,600 yards in 2021, and it failed to hit 4,000 in a year 1 under McDaniels. Darren Waller, a better tight end than Tony Scheffler ever was, saw under 5 targets a game in 2022, down from 8.5 targets a game in 2021 and 9 targets per game in 2020. Again, you can point to Adams or Josh Jacobs' big year in the backfield, and they put up huge individual numbers. But at what real cost? Just like in Denver, Josh McDaniels found a way to alienate a slew of his offensive playmakers. It starts with Derek Carr. After 15 games with McDaniels, it became clear that the relationship between QB and coach simply wasn't going to last. I had never heard Derek spoken to like Josh did, one Raiders player told a Sports Illustrated reporter. He didn't drop F-bombs or ridicule him, but film sessions with Josh are brutal. Another Raiders player said that McDaniels ripped Carr more than anyone, and that McDaniels was unfairly putting everything on him. Josh McDaniels had sold Derek on how much he believed in him, and the criticism, I think, and it is just one guy's opinion, made Derek think that Josh was dishonest, another player said. McDaniels ended up benching Carr for the final 2 games of the season in favor of backup Jarrett Stidham, who you'll be shocked to learn was a New England Patriot while McDaniels was there. Whether or not it was time for the Raiders to move on for Carr, there's no denying that he brought stability to a franchise that had to wade through passers like Kerry Collins, Andrew Walter, Jamarcus Russell, Charlie Fry, Carson Palmer, and Terrell Pryor in the post-Rich Gannon era that made them a perennial laughingstock of a team for over a decade. Carr brought them a level of respectability that can't be calculated, an unquestioned passion towards his team. McDaniels rewarded him with an unceremonious exit. Sound familiar? So how did McDaniels fill the void at quarterback? Much like when he tried to court his former muse in Matt Castle, he reached out to Jimmy Garoppolo, Tom Brady's backup from 2014 to 2017. Once again, history repeats itself. Garoppolo can win in the NFL. Kyle Shanahan has proved as much, but it takes an offense that prioritizes yards after the catch, and neither Jacoby Myers or Davante Adams are within the top 100 in that category. He also needs a monster tight end to excel, and well, let's get to that. Changing quarterbacks wasn't enough for McDaniels. He needed to detonate a bomb within the Raiders' offense and blow it to smithereens. And that also included trading stud tight end Darren Waller? The Raiders sent Waller to the NFL's version of Siberia, shipping him to the New York Giants in exchange for a 2023 third-round pick that the Raiders used to select Cincinnati wide receiver Trey Tucker, who currently has 0 receptions for 0 yards on just 2 targets through the first 5 games of the season. McDaniels and GM Dave Ziegler had to fill the hole at tight end, so they spent the 35th overall pick on tight end Michael Mayer. And through 5 games, Mayer has contributed just 3 receptions for 41 yards to the Raiders' offense. But wait, they also signed veteran tight end Austin Hooper, who's racked up an astounding 62 yards in the McDaniels offense. Waller, playing in the saw trap that the Giants call an offense, leads all New York receivers with 23 receptions and 239 yards, though that's not really bragging. Through the first 5 games of 2023, the Raiders are the only NFL team that has yet to score 20 points in a game. Okay, the 6th game, they scored 21 points. Hunter Renfrow has been targeted just 9 times. A former 1,000-yard receiver made essentially irrelevant in favor of former Patriot Jacoby Myers. Yes, the same Jacoby Myers that quite literally handed the Raiders a free win against New England a year ago. One might think, based on a number of factors, that Renfrow would have been a perfect fit for the Josh McDaniels offense. And just not because of his paleness. Renfrow excels in the slot, has elite quickness, and McDaniels has completely ignored him. Also, what happened to Josh Jacobs, the stud running back that led the entire NFL in rushing just a year ago? He wanted to get paid for his efforts, and the Raiders decided that his reward was the franchise tag, which always goes over well with superstars. Eventually, the two sides broke their stalemate just a couple weeks before the season started, and the McDaniels-Ziegler duo handed him a one-year deal worth $12 million, roughly $2 million more than he would have earned on the tag. And it hasn't worked out for either side. Jacobs is averaging less than 3 yards per carry after being an automatic 5 yards on the ground a year before. Whether that points to offensive failings by the Raiders unit as a whole, or it's just the result of a bitter holdout, that's anyone's guess. But trust me, it's not helping his value. We haven't even touched on the massive Chandler Jones signing and the subsequent release, but that's really just a sad situation, and as incompetent as Josh McDaniels is, I can't even pin that situation on him. Here's what I can though. The Raiders' offense has gone from respectable to anemic in a matter of a couple years. The defense is slightly below average, but that may very well be the result of playing 3 games against the Broncos, Steelers, and Packers, teams that don't exactly excel in the realm of point scoring. Against a true contender like the Bills or even a fake contender like the Chargers, the Raiders were either embarrassed or exposed like a 5'8" guy lying about his height on a dating profile. For the record, I am actually 5'11". You can't give Mark Davis the benefit of the doubt when it comes to hiring Josh McDaniels. It doesn't work like that when his history as a head coach includes ripping apart a good offense in Denver and showing his true colors by leaving the Indianapolis Colts at the altar, which he did prior to the 2018 season. And it's hard to even blame McDaniels. A snake is a snake. It's in his nature to slither around and bite anyone who poses a threat to him. Mark Davis passed up on a locker room favorite for a man who's unusually adept at turning his players against him, and it should come as no surprise that he's done exactly that. Bisaccia is still loved by Raiders players. I doubt you see McDaniels getting dapped up by his former guys. The Raiders are going nowhere. Mark Davis failed to smarten up when it came to hiring a head coach. They say not to listen to fans or you'll be sitting next to them soon, but they do have a point. He has been bitten by the snake.
Of all the football teams in the 2021 season, the Las Vegas Raiders were one of them. In hindsight, it's almost inconceivable to think of every tribulation that they had experienced. It was a year where adversity didn't break them, but somehow made them stronger. The ultimate underdog story full of flameouts, coaching turmoil, off-field drama rivaling the Oilers of 1993, and a simple coin of destiny. Las Vegas gambled with fire, and in the end, we only knew one thing. The Autumn Shroud is indeed a Raider. But first, a little backstory. The Raiders had gone through several seasons of, what's the best way to say it? Futility? A changing of identity? The autumn fart? A team that had spent years giving the middle finger to their own fans in Oakland left there in 2019 by giving them the middle finger on the way out. The Black Hole took their failure as well as you'd expect them to. Did you really have to shit on Derek Carr for the defense collapsing and a missed extra point? Speaking of collapses, that's what happened in 2020. 6-3 start is promising enough, but not when the defense is such shit they ended the year losing 5 of 6. Worst of all, they spent significant resources in draft capital in trying to fix said defense. None of it worked. The only option from here was to replace yes-man Paul Genther with Gus Bradley, a man who understood how a defense worked in theory. The other was to kick the sloppy seconds of John Gruden to the curb, but that wasn't happening with the mammoth contract he was signed to. What did was trying to ask the Bears to trade Khalil Mack back to them. I'm sorry that you pissed away the draft picks you got from them, Raiders, but no backsies. As they settled into Las Vegas, they got into some really cringe-worthy virtue signaling. And it wasn't their response to Carl Nassib saying he was gay. It was in the response to Derek Chauvin being found guilty on all charges. No, Raiders, George can't breathe, he's fucking dead! Mark Davis took responsibility for it, but it was just so goddamn tone-deaf. It's a moot point, however. The real issue was in the executive branch. You could argue that high-ranking officials resigning after a major move is commonplace, but not several of them unexpectedly in succession. Especially when grumblings of tax issues are starting to bubble to the surface. This was a critical year for them. The first real foray into the Vegas experience. The Black Hole would descend onto the Death Star, or the Roomba, or whatever you wanted to call it, to probably see some form of mediocrity. A team led by Derek Carr at quarterback. Eternally underrated, but there are some doubts as to if he's the man that can take them anywhere. Skill positions loaded with Josh Jacobs at running back, with Henry Ruggs going very fast, Hunter Renfro's majesty, and Darren Waller being a beast as usual at receiver and tight end. Max Crosby is also a damn good stud at defensive end. Raiders fans will say that he validates what the Gruden-Mayock regime is doing, but that's more dumb luck. Or perhaps Mike Mayock was in Gruden's ear about him. He arguably was with Josh Jacobs. Week 1 was the beginning of a new season, and was what dreams are made of. The first game in Las Vegas with a capacity crowd on Monday Night Football. They were probably going to get crushed against Baltimore, but the Ravens are getting crushed with injury. They only lost 2 of their key players to ACL tears on back-to-back plays in practice. It would be a surprisingly tight matchup. The slings of hell thrown around for 60 minutes. But a predictable field goal by Justin Tucker deep into the 4th ended the match. Or did it? Baltimore suddenly forgot how to defense, and Daniel Carlson kicked them into overtime. And then everything got absolutely fucked. And I mean fucked. Even more fucked. And then the Raiders won. Take it as an appetizer of the madness to come. I don't mean what happened in Pittsburgh. The Steelers were flat out beaten because they couldn't cover a window and an injured TJ Watt ruined their pass rush. Week 3 was Miami in a grudge match for last year. No Fitzception to try and save you this time, Dolphins. It would be Jacoby Brissett for the last-second touchdown to tie the game. You think that really matters? Of course it doesn't. Daniel Carlson is a fucking legend. With this kick, an unbelievable revelation had occurred. The Raiders were 3-0. God help us all. When you give Raider Nation oxygen, a grease fire spreads as fast as the fucking Omicron variant. It was somewhat quashed in a rather convincing loss in a home game in LA against the Chargers. But something sinister was about to be sent to their inbox.
You've got mail.
The NFL's investigation of the formerly Deadskins revealed some rather tasty tidbits about John Gruden. You may be asking how Gruden, who was on Monday Night Football at the time, sputtered to why bananaed his way into this scandal. That's because of this man, Bruce Allen. He and Gruden were partners in crime in the demolition of Tampa Bay, and they kept email correspondence, such as this lovely comment about DeMaurice Smith. He of, quote, lips the size of Michelin tires. Apparently, Gruden used that terminology to say someone's a liar, but considering past stereotypes, it won't work in the modern era. It dogged the Raiders heading into their match against Chicago, and they suffered the worst fate imaginable, allowing Justin Fields to gain confidence after being destroyed by a terrible offensive line. At 3-2, all should still be relatively calm, but then came more emails. A shit ton more. Where Gruden shit all over things the NFL pretends to embrace in modern times. Rightfully spitting on King Goodell's face by calling him a clueless anti-football pussy. And liberally throwing around the word faggot. You know, when one of his players publicly came out of the closet this past summer? Once all of this was revealed, he was fucked. There was no way he could have gone back into that locker room and have the respect of his players. But there was a silver and black lining. With these revelations, Mark Davis can get out of the buyer's remorse, that is, that awful contract they signed him to. With Chucky being due for a date with a firing squad, he chose to fall on his own sword and save himself just a shred of dignity. I just ask one question. Why was he the only one who suffered any repercussions for this bullshit? Once he was chucked out, the NFL said the emails were safe and they were the best organization in the world. They then gave themselves a medal for ending racism. Long live the Shield. The Raiders seemed all but finished as well. Their interim coach would be longtime special teams coordinator Rich Bisaccia, who had long dreamed of being a head coach at this level, but not exactly in this kind of a situation. Here is where something incredible happened. The team didn't disintegrate as expected. They grew stronger. In matchups against Philadelphia and Denver, Las Vegas had played complete, tenacious, and effective football. The Raiders had shown that they weren't a fluke, but something greater. At 5-2, they were in good position for a playoff spot. But sometimes a good thing is as fleeting as a night on the town in Vegas. That brutal reminder involved Henry Ruggs, his girlfriend, and an incredible fuck-up. The meme went like this: Henry Ruggs go fast. Unfortunately, this guy gave it a meaning no one dared to dream of. There are only 2 words to describe his actions on the morning of November 2nd, 2021. Fucking idiot. After partying in Sin City and nowhere near capable of driving, He stepped into the driver's seat of his sports car and raced down the streets of Vegas suburbs at 156 miles per hour, while over double the legal limit for intoxication of 0.16%. This would prove to be a fatal decision. He slammed right into the back of a Toyota RAV4 and squealed to a stop hundreds of feet past the point of contact. Ruggs and his girlfriend escaped with minor injuries. Their intoxication may have actually saved them from death. 23-year-old Tina Tinter and her dog weren't as lucky. They survived the initial collision, but the car quickly catches fire. Tinter died in agony. She burned alive. With this heinous failure in judgment, the football career of Henry Ruggs is finished. It certainly is with the Raiders. He was cut the day of the accident. Ruggs currently sits in jail, facing multiple counts of DUI, manslaughter, and assault. I don't want to hear about healing, Derek Carr. The time for that is decades from now, not days after the tragedy. All we can do is mourn a life needlessly lost to one's careless actions. Football takes a backseat in this situation. After losing one of their star players, the Raiders somehow had to muster the will to play football. They had just finished up their bye week, so there was little time to try and process another heavy blow to their aspirations. The New York Giants were next, but the Silver and Black had trouble trying to play a consistent game. In a tribute to their former head coach, they collapsed Chucky style in the second half to lose a winnable contest. However, in a shocking twist, this wasn't the main headline on ESPN. It was Damon Arnett. Another colossal reach in the first round by Gruden himself. Not only was he having trouble adapting to play at the professional level, he had become a massive headache off the field. In 2020, Arnett had wrecked 4 rental cars in separate incidents. He had even been sued for a crash in front of the team's goddamn practice facility. And in a further testament to his sterling character, it all came to a head on an Instagram livestream, where he pointed guns at the camera and threatened to kill people in a rambling diatribe. The Raiders' hand was forced. They cut him after the Giants game. He bounced around a few practice squads, but that was before he was arrested for assault with a deadly weapon. And then again for drug charges. Truly a fucking idiot. Signing Deshaun Jackson as a Ruggs replacement would hopefully ease the blow, but it wouldn't be in the next 2 games. To be fair, they were against the Chiefs and Bengals. And I can't believe I'm saying that about Cincinnati, but it had showed that they weren't near the top of the food chain. Even worse, they lost another one of their offensive leaders in Alec Ingold to a torn ACL. They were 5-5, fading fast, and things seemed bleak with Dallas on the way. But then, the greatest talisman a football team has ever received. A simple coin. It had predicted every single Raiders game correctly to this point. It had predicted that they would not only win against the Cowboys, but go 10-7 and secure the 7th seed in the AFC. But first, they would have to make it past Dallas on Turkey Day. To call the game 7 different shades of fucked up would be a gross understatement as to how it played out. There'd be some luck involved off the bat. There'd be an entire world's amount of yellow towels thrown onto the field for both teams. There'd be field goals aplenty. There'd be false starts called against the center. They'd be forced into overtime. And then the entirety of the Dallas Metro would want Anthony Brown dead. Who would win the day for the Raiders? You guessed it. Daniel Carlson. Daniel Carlson. 3rd time's a charm. Daniel Carlson. Can we just end this fucking game already?
Here we go. This time for real. And it is delivered. Good.
The prophecy of chaos is no more. The prophecy of the coin is now steadfast. All hail the coin. It would last a week before losing in heartbreaking fashion to Washington. They took your coach by suspiciously leaking emails, and they took your talisman by means of a game-winning field goal. The cruelest irony. More painfully, it would take out Kenyon Drake for the remainder of the year. It would only get worse the next week. Las Vegas decided to take it upon themselves to do their team huddle on the midfield logo. The problem was they weren't at home. They were in Kansas City, and the gods do not take kindly to those that desecrate an opposing logo. The coin said they'd lose too, but probably not this awfully. A 5-2 start fell to 6-7 and a 5% chance to make the playoffs. The inevitable had seemed to be at hand. This time around, no one would blame the Raiders for falling off. Much stronger teams have fallen apart in the face of such adversity, but perhaps a little luck went their way. Headed into a game in Cleveland, a dangerous foe infiltrated their ranks. None other than Corona Chan. game that was supposed to be played on Saturday was forced to be pushed back to the majesty of Tuesday night. The Browns were without both of their quarterbacks, head coach, and 16 other players. If there were an opponent to regain your confidence, this was it. Unfortunately, Las Vegas had trouble getting past Cleveland's defense. Plus, the QB they brought in off the street did a solid job for the situation. In the fourth quarter, the Raiders were on the ropes. The Browns had the lead, and all they had to do was convert a third down to end the game. Vegas holds. Once they got the ball back, it was a repeat of Week 1. Methodically moved down the field on an exhausted defense and let Daniel Carlson do the rest.
This one counts, and the Raiders have won it.
Back to 500. It wasn't pretty, but the season was saved. While Cleveland had lacked an offense due to COVID, Denver lacked an offense due to reasons of shit coaching and bad quarterback play. A defense that used to be known for giving up points en masse shut down Denver's JV offense in the second half. The Broncos only had 8 first downs in the game. Says a bit about both teams, to be honest. The winning ways were back, but next week came the true test. The Colts in Indy. The Raiders were on the ropes. All Indianapolis had to do was win and they were in. But Vegas is a stubborn fucker. They refuse to die, even when everything is against them, when everyone has counted them out. The autumn wind somehow blows in the distance. The Colts should have had them dead to rights, but a resilient bunch manages to make it a game. And even if Indy manages to tie up the game with less than 2 minutes left, have you seen most of Las Vegas's games this year? They tend to have a flair for the dramatic. Sometimes with the great hands of Hunter Renfrow, but usually on the leg of Daniel Carlson.
Carlson from 33. His kick is good. Raiders win.
It was divine. A Raider legend smiled down from above in this one. Earlier in the week, former head coach John Madden passed on to the great gridiron field in the sky. Another devastating loss for a team that had suffered nothing but them. This time, however, it wasn't shocking but comforting. We remember the good times with him, not past traumas. This moment would be ruined by Nate Hobbs, a rookie corner who had done phenomenal work in fortifying their secondary. Learning nothing from what happened to Henry Ruggs, he was arrested for DUI. Fortunately, the situation was settled and nothing serious happened. Thank God. With this in mind, they return home for a date with destiny. The Los Angeles Chargers. All of the marbles are on the line. Winner moves on to the playoffs. The season ends for the loser. If they tie, they both make it. Thank the Steelers for that one. The black hole was at a fever pitch, and they hoped that the coin would be wrong again for prophecy to be fulfilled. It had predicted a Raiders loss. Throughout the game, Las Vegas was about to become one massive party scene. The autumn wind was blowing again. Life itself had sprung anew as the Raiders had a 15-point lead with 8 minutes left in the game. However, life always doesn't go according to plan. The Chargers have an offense that tends to go balls to the wall in these kinds of situations. As Vegas couldn't seal the deal, they have to go back on defense. All they need is one stop. Just one.
Herbert firing, and it is going to be caught in the end zone by the big body Mike Williams.
They paid homage to last year's defense. They couldn't stop them. They failed to hold the lead. All of Pittsburgh is now shitting itself. Overtime awaits. There would be field goals. And more field goals. But the Raiders are in a situation of strength, pounding the rock with Josh Jacobs to get them within a sniff of field goal range to win the game. The Silver and Black were allegedly fine with settling for the tie, but then came the greatest moment of all. A timeout by the Chargers to regroup. You could say them saying the timeout galvanized them was mere gamesmanship, but LA's mistake can't defend against the run for shit. Josh Jacobs punishes them in kind. And guess what? They're in field goal range.
Snap good, hold good, and Raiders in, Chargers out, Steelers in.
Carlson makes his 5th game winner of the season. All of Pittsburgh unclenches their anuses. The Las Vegas Raiders, after a year full of drama, twists and turns, turbulence and tribulation, had done something remarkable. They had made the playoffs. The coin was wrong again, but in doing so, its prophecy had been fulfilled. a longtime rival was forced to eat shit. They ended the year on a 4-game winning streak, a 10-7 record, and the 6th seed in the AFC. All of it with a point differential of -65. That's the most impressive part. Their opponent in the wildcard game, the Cincinnati Bengals, another team of destiny. A group that had been broken for years thanks to self-destructing in the 2016 playoffs found life again. It was if it was magic. Burrow to Chase was a deadly combination that left many secondaries destroyed in its wake. Their defense sneakily underrated. The ultimate test would be coming up for the autumn wind. This match would take place in the hostile confines of Paul Brown Stadium. Cincinnati was favored, but Las Vegas has been known to play spoiler. Just look at what they did this past season. Unfortunately, this is where cold reality came to slap them across the face. The Raiders struggled to do anything for most of the first half. And then came zebra-striped controversy.
Tries to keep it alive, scrambles, throws it back in the end zone, but was he out of bounds first or is it a touchdown?
Under the NFL's rules, this play should have been called dead after the whistle was blown. For whatever reason, the officials saw Joe Burrow as out of bounds when he clearly wasn't. The Raiders defense considered it a dead ball and allowed a touchdown to Tyler Boyd. So while technically the right decision was made and the play stood, it was still a terrible call by the official. No wonder why this ref crew wasn't brought back for any future playoff games. The fortunate thing is that the Raiders still had a chance. With Derek Carr guiding them to a rapid-fire touchdown to end the half, they were only down by 7. However, that's all the offense could really muster. They'd play hard, they'd do everything they could to win. But no matter what, it just never seemed to be enough. The Raiders would make field goals, yet the Bengals would counter with their own. It was Raiders 19, Bengals 26 deep into the fourth quarter. This was their last chance. A nice deep spiral to Darren Waller gives them life. It takes them to the red zone. Another first down by Zay Jones gets them to the 9. But Cincy's defense holds firm. They stop them on 2nd and 3rd down. Here it is. All the marbles on 4th down.
The season comes down to this. It is Carr end zone. Intercepted.
The worst part about a real-life underdog story is that they usually don't play out like a Hollywood screenplay. In those films, they go on to win the game, the girl, and the glory, but none of that happened here. With that pick, the Raiders' season was over. It was an outstanding campaign, all things considered. But unfortunately, they were bested on this day. If it eases the sting, the Bengals would go on to the Super Bowl, but it means nothing for Las Vegas. The final casualties of a season of turmoil had to occur. Mike Mayock had always been tied to the hip of John Gruden. And with the season over, the Raiders wanted a fresh start. His firing had sealed their legacy as an entirely predictable disaster. Look at these draft classes. All 3 of their 2019 first-round picks had their 5th-year options declined. If it weren't for Max Crosby and Hunter Renfrow, their draft classes would have given them next to nothing. Worst of all, most of these first-round picks were insane reaches at the time. Gruden had final say in picks, so his talent assessment was as god-awful as it had been. At least Mike can go back to television, unlike a certain partner of his. The other price to pay was Rich Bisaccia. His excellent motivating should have gotten him another chance with the silver and black. But like with Mayock, Las Vegas chose to go in a different direction. He got shafted. He was let go of duty. He would latch on in Green Bay as a special teams coordinator, but he deserved so much better. To replace them, they chose to pay homage to the Tuck rule and try to skin the Patriots alive. Their new head coach is the cancer of Josh McDaniels. All of Denver is currently cackling like hyenas. Despite my cynicism, the 2022 Raiders should be many things. Perhaps playoff contenders, especially with a big-time wideout in Devontae Adams acquired. A strong pass-rushing team with Chandler Jones added. They'll hopefully draft better. However, the 2021 season was a special one for Las Vegas, in both the good and the bad. A team full of complexity, turmoil, tragedy, and glory in a single package. They're a soap opera equaling the '93 Oilers and the bickering Bills. And their story will make for a damn good 30 for 30 in the future. I can't wait until that comes out.